And you have the floor, Aisha.
Hey, thank you, Ayana. Good evening and welcome to the Russell City Reparative Justice Project Steering Committee. We're going to call the meeting to order. Today is Wednesday, March 15th. It is meeting time. We're going to start with just an opening statement that this meeting is being recorded. This meeting is being recorded, and that is based upon an agreed upon measure between the steering committee and the city of Hayward. And these videos can be found on the city website after the meeting has taken place and been approved by the committee after the committee's review. So we are the descendants and former residents of Russell City on this committee. We are here in an effort to bring forward and to receive information about the truth as to what happened in Russell City to our families and to our loved ones and those who support us. So please, as you're viewing this video, be patient with us, as there are things that sometimes are said that bring up memories and feelings and trauma and things that we as committee members may need to work through. And we acknowledge that it is not our intent to cause further harm or pain to anyone who is watching or participating in this process. We are all learning as we are going through it and doing the best that we can. So thank you for sharing this space with us. And we are going to get moving with roll call for the meeting. Let me see. Usually I call on Miss Jenny Chacon to assist with roll call, and I forgot that she is not here this evening. So we will go to roll call with, give me a moment. I don't know if somebody has it up. Ayana, do you have the?
I can reshare.
Okay, thank you. All right. So Ms. Gloria Moore.
Present.
Thank you. Good evening. Ayana Knowles is present. Michael V. Johnson.
Present.
Thank you. Good evening. I am here. Miss Deborah Harris. Okay, I see you raise your hand.
Yeah.
Right. Good evening. Ms. Marion Johnson.
Present.
Good evening, Ms. Marion.
Good evening.
Thank
Good
you.
evening.
Ms. Liz Moran Sanchez.
Present.
Good evening. Thank you. Ms. Tony Wynn.
Present.
Good evening, Ms. Tony.
Good evening.
Ms. Carolyn Johnson.
I am present.
Thank you and good evening to you. Michael D. Johnson.
Present.
Thank you and good evening.
Good evening.
Ms. Cindy Torres, I believe just logged on, so under the name CCA. Good evening, Cindy Torres.
Good evening, everyone. Sorry.
No, you're fine. You're fine. No worries. We're glad you're here. And Priscilla Figueroa.
Present.
Good
Hi.
evening. Good evening, Ms. Priscilla. Ms. Kathy Rodriguez. Let's see, is she on just yet? All right, we'll come back to her. And Ms. Francesca Thomas.
Present.
Good evening, Ms.
Good
Francesca.
evening.
Thank you for joining us. Okay, that concludes the roll, and we have a quorum. And as some of you may have noticed, we are joined by a couple of new members on the steering committee. And so we wanted to give them the opportunity to give a brief introduction about themselves. And so two of those members are here presently, Ms. Priscilla Figueroa and Ms. Francesca Thomas. So Ms. Priscilla, we'll start with you. Would you like to
Hi, everyone.
share an update about yourself for about a minute?
Okay, I'm excited to be here. And I've been in the process almost 2 years since we started and we split up, and I'm just community oriented, and I worked in the community before. Under Charlie Santana, I was a citizen at large, and I worked with the Alameda County when they annexed my area, and I'm excited. Thank you.
Thank you, Priscilla. And do you want to talk a little bit about your connection to Russell City?
I was married in Russell City. My husband, James Figueroa, he lived there, and his grandparents as well, the Chavez family. And I attended the Apostolic Church in Russell City for many years, since 1956. That's when I came from Mexico. But I loved it. It was a good community, and I felt at home with a lot of people. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Priscilla, and thank you for being here this evening. Next, we'll transition to Francesca Thomas. Welcome, Francesca.
Hi, everyone. Good evening, and thank you so much for inviting me to participate. I am a local business owner. I do handmade, artisan crafted soaps and body care products. My connection to Russell City is I am a descendant. My great-great-grandmother was Leona Alves. She owned Ideal Dining Restaurant. So she lived in Russell City, as well as my great-grandmother, Odella Hightower, and then my grandparents, Rudell and Barbara Hightower, also lived there, and my mother and her 3 siblings also lived in Russell City. And actually, I think when I did my introduction the first time, I didn't mention the Hightowers. So any of you that know the Hightower girls, those were my mother and my aunts, and she does remember a few of you guys, so thank you.
Well, thank you for that introduction, and we're glad you're here as well. Thank you for joining us. All right. We will, let me just make sure Miss Kathy Rodriguez is not present. Okay. So that concludes item number 3 on the agenda and brings us, we're going to move right into item number 4, which is the discussion of the recommendation for facilitator/project manager in response to the City of Hayward's RFP, their request for proposal. So I also will request that the other members of the leadership team also feel free to share information. So in the last process, in our last meeting, or in the last message that was received, Michael V. Johnson sent an email to the committee requesting any questions or feedback about the vendors, that there were 3 vendors who submitted RFPs or responses to the RFP that was put out by the city. 2 of those vendors were interviewed by myself, Liz Sanchez, Deborah Harris, and Michael V. Johnson on this past Monday and Tuesday, and where we did pass on the feedback and questions that were shared by members of the committee. So we wanted to have discussion on how the 2 interviews went with the finalists. They were of the 3 groups that submitted applications or responses to the RFP. The Genius Group was one group that was interviewed, as well as the Series Research Group, who was led by Dr. Kirby Lynch. And so, am I leaving anything out? Okay, all right. And so the recommendation so there are 2 two different vendors. I think they had different skill sets and strengths to provide to our group. So we didn't have a moment to have one recommendation. So the Genius Group has a member of their team who is local and has done work locally, and has submitted their information as part of the original RFP process that we initiated. And then they also took the time to submit their application for the city's RFP process. And then the series research group is also a group with some local roots. They are doing some work with the San Francisco Reparations Committee, as well as they've worked in Contra Costa County with the Office of Racial Equity. And so they had two different approaches, as you saw from the application packets or the packets that they submitted. One large variance between the two groups was the budget, the budget that was estimated. But I think what we learned from the budget process, or the process around the discussion related to the budget, is the research or the process that we're going through is pretty fluid. And so, I think the way that at least I viewed it is this project would happen in phases. And it's very possible that later on in the process, or as we move from one phase to the next, there may be additional funding available from other parties and or organizations who want to support the work that is being done. Liz, Ms. Deborah, or Michael B. Johnson, do you have anything to add about the process?
I'll save my comments for last.
Okay. Ms. Deborah, how about you? What was your overall impression of the two finalists?
Miss Deborah, if you're talking, you're on.
I'm sorry. Yeah,
okay.
I'm sorry. I like the series group. They were more into us. They listened and they answered a lot of questions. The other group, I felt they were qualified as well, but it was like they ignored the ladies that were on the call. The guy, all of his remarks, for the most part, were directed at Michael because they're friends, and that's okay. But we were all on the call, and our faces should have showed up as women. I don't know. But anyway, I like the second one better because they have done some work in this reparation project that we are involved in. So I think they're local. We don't have to pay for travel. So I think that they would be a good match for us.
Okay, thank you for sharing your opinion. Liz.
Thank you, Aisha. I also echo Deborah on some of her comments. The series group were so engaged that it was, they understood our needs, and they also presented a presentation differentiating the different meanings. Aisha helped me when they put like spiritual, what was that called?
It was, so they identified education reparations, spiritual reparations. I forget what the other, hold on. Come
Sorry.
back to me. I'll remember. I tried to make a note for myself, but they identified other areas of that aside from replacing the harm that was done as a result of land being removed. They also identified other categories that expand the definition of repairing the harm that may have been done that we should also explore as part of this process.
Exactly. So they are in this, they're involved in San Francisco. They're very local. They're very just engaging in their conversation. They took the time to listen. They read the room. I think they would be a really good fit, and they seem flexible and to our needs, and they would seem that they would take directions from us, and their communication was outstanding in terms of their presentation of communicating to other Russell City, and they really emphasized on social media so that they can reach out to those that haven't even heard about this. They had the ability and the people to speak Spanish because of the Latinx that are in from Russell City. So they have that option because some of my family speak Spanish, and that's their first language. So they would probably feel more comfortable explaining or being involved in this.
Is that your dog that is growling?
Yes. I have my hand in
Yes,
his mouth.
you have an enchilada.
I just wanted to make sure the meeting wasn't hacked or something.
Sorry.
I'm looking at everybody's mute symbol and I was like, I think it's a dog. Okay, just checking. All right. My apologies for interrupting. Go ahead.
That's okay, no problem. I forgot he was doing it. I'm back in a house. Thank the Lord. I've been through a little trial this last month, so I'm trying to get situated here. But back to the meeting. My vote is for series. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. I found my notes on the reparations categories. So the categories that were identified by the series group that were part of their overview during the presentation that we heard for the support that they would provide to our committee included political, intellectual, economic, legal, social reparations and spiritual reparations, and I might have forgotten one, but those were the categories that they, in the work that they have been doing in this space with San Francisco, I think lent itself to having a deeper understanding of what we may need to ask for, and the research that we would need to do in order to tell the full story and to tell the full story of what our families experienced. And so I did find that information helpful. One of the concerns that was discussed with both vendors was related to the time of the meetings. With the series group, because they've done this work, they didn't anticipate with the schedule that had been presented that the evening meetings would be a challenge for them. They also, as part of the process, understand that some of the communication is going to involve very little technology and would involve phone calls and needing to meet with folks in person. Because not all of the Russell City residents and descendants have access to technology or are able to use or in positions where they can use Zoom all of the time. And so that time may be more effectively spent gathering stories and information from folks via via a no tech and moderately technology focused campaign, which was helpful because, you know, as part of this process, we know that we may need to send paper newsletters through the mail, you know, in addition to having Zoom meetings, as well as calls with people who are interested in updates from the committee. Michael V. Johnson.
Good evening. So in complete transparency, I want to be sure that the entire committee knows that I am responsible for both of the candidates applying for this opportunity, not just the Genius Group. I've known the Genius Group a lot longer. I've met with both of the groups prior to the RFPs. I met the series group as a result of the Mills College Reparations Conference. And as they were speaking on the phone, I took down their information, emailed them, asked them to apply, and had an opportunity to understand what their background and experience was even before they submitted their RFP. So I'm quite familiar. I'm more familiar with the Genius Group, having known the CEO of that company for the last 30 years. On its face, I would say from a wealth of experience and from a breadth of experience and from a quality of the clients that they have served, that the Genius Group is vastly superior. I would say the challenge with the Genius Group, as we discussed earlier, was the fact that they are based in Atlanta. And as a result, they are on a 3-hour time change compared to where we are. They have several large clients in the San Francisco Bay Area, including the Public Health Institute, which is in Berkeley. Part of the reason we had to meet with the Genius Group early on the 13th instead of the 14th, because they were actually serving that client, the Public Health Institute based in Berkeley. So while they are 3 hours away, they have always shown their ability to be able to work with their clients, and their clients are international in scope. So the ability, but that is a challenge that they will face. What I liked about the series group is the fact that they are both here in Oakland, in the Bay Area. They have some familiarity with the San Francisco reparations project. In fact, we're involved with that, which could have its pluses and could also have its minuses, given the recommendations that have been made by the San Francisco Reparations Committee. That being said, I think that the way that I do believe, based on what I've seen of both of their proposals, that the budget for the series group, quite frankly, is understated. I don't think that they adequately assess what it would take to do the work. So I think that the amount that they're asking for is a little lower than what they would need in order to do an efficient job. But they both can do the job. And so it's really a matter of who we want to choose to do the work, given that this work is important. I've always been one to say you get what you pay for. And so at the end of the day, we got to think about it from the perspective of what we think makes best sense for us and how each of these vendors might be able to support us in doing that work. So I'm not going to make a recommendation for either one of them. I think I've made my preference clear, but where I'm at is both of these vendors do possess the skill set and the ability to do this work.
Thank you, Michael. I agree with you. I do. So I think just on paper, one budget was very understated, the series group, and one budget was very detailed. And the budget proposal, as many of you saw in the packets that were shared, was very high and far exceeded the amount of money that we have budgeted for the committee thus far. Having said that, you know, I think that this process that we're going through is very fluid, and I'm just going to put it out there that I think as part of this process, over, whatever length of time we are engaged in it, that there will be other funding sources. So I'm not looking at, right now, I'm not necessarily looking at the budget being a deal breaker as to whether or not someone is able to do the work. When it comes to communication and portfolios and depth of experience with the type of work that we are that we are engaging in and will need assistance in preparing to gauge other agencies in, I believe they both have strong skill sets. I do think that with the number of clients and the organizations that the Genius Group has worked with, they've done a lot of work internationally, and so they bring a different type of experience to the table. I do believe that the series group, also would be capable of bringing the same level of experience and expertise. What I find to be a benefit is people who are doing this work locally, in terms of their ability to know the players in this space that are also talking as part, or participating in the San Francisco process, participating in the state reparations process. So I did find that to be quite beneficial for our committee when the series group, when they identified that and the work that they're doing on contract with the San Francisco Reparations Committee. So I found that to be a benefit for them. And I will just say, I don't know if it was a virtual meeting format sort of delivery, but the interview that we held with the Genius Group, something was off, and it did not come across, at least from my perspective in the meeting, that the individual that was participating, it might be challenging for him to read the Zoom room at times. And I think in this process, it's a balance, it's a constant balancing process and a learning process of trying to either push a conversation forward, pull it back, move it to the side, get other people to jump in and participate. And so in who I think may be better effective communicators in this space is the series group. The quality of experience and length of experience in terms of the large Fortune 500 organizations that are being that they have experience working with is, the Genius Group definitely has that experience that also could be of value to us. But for this phase of the process, I think for the information that we heard from the series group and their relationships locally, for the budget that they identified, which I agree, I do believe it was understated, because I don't think that we we even know, we don't even know what we don't know just yet. And so I don't want us to be limited by a $45,000 budget and have that limit a vendor who might be interested in doing this work. So I'll say overall, I thought the RFP process, we might need to look at the entire process differently and break it into phases. For this particular phase where we're getting through the research and trying to gather as much information as we can to identify to define harm and the various types of harm that have been done to our families in Russell City. I think the series group, for the information that I heard as part of the interview process, would be effective in helping us. But I do believe that both groups are more than capable of doing the work. This item is listed as an action item. And so are there others who would like to share what their reflections are from reading the RFP packets? I think you've heard from all of us as to what our thoughts are on both of the interviews. Or would someone like to make a motion as to which vendor to proceed with for this part of the facilitation and project management of our committee? CJ, I see your hand.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to proceed with Cirrus.
Thank you. There's a motion on the floor to proceed with Cirrus. Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you, Ayana. It's been moved by Carolyn Johnson, and the second has been issued by Ayana Knowles. All those in favor, please raise your physical hand in the space or your virtual hand by using the reaction button.
Can we have a discussion first?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Good call, Cindy. Good call. My apologies. Discussion's a question.
Yes. Since we feel that they have underestimated the cost of this series, should we go back to them first and ask them to make sure that they are covering all the areas that we want, and to, for them to look at the budget again, because we don't want to be short on what we expect of them when they come up short. So, or are we just approving to talk to them about it right now?
Michael V. Johnson, are you able to respond to that question?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
What I would say, Cindy, is that we've been waiting a very long time to get to a place where we can make a decision. What I would recommend is that we approve a budget of a certain amount, regardless of what it is that they've actually bid upon, to ensure that they have what they need in order for them to do the work. But to turn around again and take another, I mean, we've been trying to do this for 2.5 months now. So to try to postpone it again is just a further delay that we cannot afford.
I agree with that, but will we be able to, for ourselves, put extra money into a budget that may be required for them to complete the work if needed, if it's not factored in right now?
So the money is there. It's all about allocation.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. And Ms. Youngblood, the Assistant City Manager for the City of Hayward. And I apologize, I did not, I moved right into the meeting. I forgot to, was not intentional. I forgot to acknowledge the city staff member present and other guests on this call. So Ms. Youngblood, I apologize.
No worries. I just wanted to make sure just that I interjected a little bit about the city process for entering into a contract. So while this money has been allocated for committee use, the city still will contract with your selected vendor. The amount of their contract is important because if we approve their scope of work with their stated amount, it would require that we go back and do contractual amendments, right? So we couldn't just say, okay, we're going to give you 60,000, even though your statement of work or the budget portion of your proposal says 45. We'd contract them for 45. And if, as the project proceeded, additional funding might have been necessary because there is a change in scope or an expansion of scope, we'd have to enter into an amendment. So I just wanted to provide that technical thought for you so that you don't think about necessarily approving a budget aside from the proposal itself.
All right, thank you, Ms. Youngblood. Are there other questions or comments? We still have the motion and the second on the floor. Cindy, did that help answer your question?
Yes,
Okay,
thank you.
all right. All right, so I'm gonna, unless there are any other questions, we're gonna proceed with the vote. So all those in favor of the series group in proceeding with this part of the project management and facilitation process for the Russell City Reparative Justice Steering Committee, please raise your hand or virtual hand in the Zoom screen or use a thumbs up. And so we have
I count 7.
Yes, okay. All right. 7. Anyone opposed to proceeding? Okay, you may lower your hands. Anyone opposed to proceeding with the series group? Please raise your physical hand in your Zoom screen or your virtual hand by using the reaction emoji. Okay, don't see anybody.
No hands.
Okay, no hands. Anyone who would like to abstain from the vote, please raise your hand. Okay, 1,
2,
2. Okay,
3.
3. Francesca, is that you? Okay, 3.
okay, 3. And that we have a couple people. Priscilla.
I'm new to this and I'm not too sure, but what I
Sure.
heard, it sounds like this group, Genesis would be more able to serve. I didn't know if I had voting rights or not.
That is a good point. I don't believe you were on the list of steering committee members who received the RFP packets because that was prior to today.
Yeah.
And so since that is the case, I think it would be appropriate for you to abstain for the vote because you haven't had the chance to review all of the information.
Okay, I agree with the group agrees.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much.
Hey,
Oh.
Aisha, we should also establish who the voting members are and who the
Yes.
alternate members are.
Thank you. Thank you. And so the voting members are, so Priscilla would be a voting member.
Oh, thank you.
And Francesca. I don't have it all memorized, so one moment. I'm
I
pulling up
have the
the-
list who was. who.
Okay, I'm pulling up the email from Jenny. Francesca, you are a and Francesca is a voting member as well. All right. Just to make sure Kathy Rodriguez is not on the call. Okay. And so that would be 4 abstentions. 7 yes.
3 abstain.
So 3 abstained. However, we would add you would be added to the group that abstains because you were not present for you didn't receive all of the information in order to vote.
Okay.
So that makes 11. So we're missing. Someone dropped from the call. Did somebody drop from the call earlier?
Liz switched devices.
Okay, all right, because there were 16 earlier. So we're missing, there's 13 voting members. Is there?
I thought we had, I thought we had 11 last time I heard, but so I don't know if things changed.
I don't
Sorry.
know that, did Michael, the other Michael Johnson vote?
Let me see.
He did vote.
He did?
Mhm.
Okay.
Where's Deborah Harris? Is she?
She dropped.
Oh,
He
Deborah
dropped.
Harris dropped. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I was like looking at the attendance list.
Okay, so then we're missing Debbie Harris, missing 1. Because there's 3 staff members. All right, we're going to call for the vote again.
Sabina
one?
Munoz, is she part of it?
No,
Okay.
not yet. No, we haven't heard back from her. Gloria. Oh, Gloria, you're
I
raising
was
your hand
voting.
because you're ready
Oh,
for the
oh,
vote?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, all right. Hey, no, I'm all for it. All right. Anyone in favor, those who are in favor of proceeding with the series group. So the motion has been made by Carolyn Johnson. The second was made by Ayana Knowles. Please raise your hand or your virtual hand in the space using your reaction emoji.
I guess I don't.
7.
7. Okay. All right. Anyone opposed to
Wait,
proceeding?
Marion, was that for, okay, so Marion's hand, so it's
8.
and then
Okay.
Priscilla is abstaining.
Abstaining, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone opposed to, okay, we can please lower your hands. All right. Anyone opposed to proceeding with the series group, please raise your virtual hand or physical hand in your Zoom space. Okay, no one. Last call. If you're voting no, please raise your hand. All right. Anyone who would like to abstain from this vote, please raise your hand, either physical or virtual. 1, 2.
Deborah Harris is entering the room.
Okay, all right. And Cindy. So we have 4 abstentions. All right, well, Hello, Ms. Deborah. Would you like to vote on the, it looks like you lost connection right as we were voting. So would you like to cast your vote? It's for the series group. If you would like the series group to proceed with the facilitation and project management of our group. Yes, no, or would you like to abstain?
I don't know if she can even hear you.
Okay, all right. Well, we're gonna, the vote is 7 yeses, 4 abstentions, and 0 no's, so the vote passes. And so congratulations. And thank you for everyone's work in reviewing the information, submitting questions. Thank you to Michael, Liz, and Deborah for all the work that you did in order for us to hold the 2 information interviews with both vendors and to move this process forward. So thank you. Ms. Youngblood, do you need any additional information from us before we proceed to the next item?
No.
Okay, thank you. All right. We are moving the meeting along. Okay.
Only a little behind.
Only a little behind. That's all right. We're on the research item now. And Liz Brown and George Behringer, welcome and good evening. This is the moment we always look forward to the updates that you have about what's going on with the research. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. At the steering committee, you asked if I could do a presentation. So can I share the screen?
I'm not the Zoom host, so
Hold, please.
One.
And keep a tight ship over here. Try now.
All right. Oh, it's still disabled. Let me try again. Still disabled, it looks like.
Okay,
But I mean, I can just talk through it.
Go for it. I promise I know how to use
Perfect.
Zoom.
Excellent. All right. Thank you all. All right. So here is the update on where we've been since we last spoke. So we're still in the information collection stage, and there are 3 primary areas that we've concentrated on this stage in the recent that I'll update you on today. And that has to do with the deeds from the recorder's office, the media searches that we're doing, and then the board of supervisor records that we're just starting to collect. So the deeds are pretty much mostly all collected. So there's a few remaining questions from some of the deeds we collected that we'll need to go back and figure out the answer for, but there's just a few of those. So the overview is that we used the search term redevelopment agency of the county of Alameda, since that was the term that was used on the redevelopment side to find the records. There were 734 returns, and those returns are between 1963 and 1967. We found through that process 357 unique deeds. They were primarily individuals, so it probably doesn't reflect the number of, for instance, businesses that were in a space, since businesses, places that seem to be businesses were often identified as individuals' ownership, which makes a lot of sense. But there were 2 businesses that were named on the deeds, 6 churches or organizations, and then 1 deed for the county of Alameda. In addition to the unique deeds that we found, we also found some legal documents, some offers to sell, some probate sales, etc. Just a handful of those, like literally like 1 offer to sale. I think there were 2 probate sales. Those were good because those documents actually listed what was paid for the property. So we have some information from that. And in addition, as part of the search, 31 eminent domain lawsuits were also returned. And these eminent domain lawsuits often list a number of entities. It looks like they were doing it like kind of at the block level. I haven't looked at, done that analysis, but that's what it appears at first glance. So the deeds are collected, we're close to finalization, the deeds list, and that has been turned over to the city of Hayward for the creation of the map that we're doing. So I'll go ahead and if there are not any questions on any of that at the moment, I'll go to the next.
Any
And-
questions from anyone?
perfect.
Like Michael V. Johnson?
So is that the extent of your search in terms of what you've looked for?
In terms of the deeds,
And
but we also have the media search and the Board of Supervisor records and other records that we found.
right, but before we go to the media search,
Okay.
how do you go about identifying those individuals who live in Russell City and didn't own land? Because this would only give you that piece.
Correct. And that's something that we've talked about with the city and the steering committee, you know, since the beginning, that this is just going to give us the people who own the property. So it's only going to give us about 40% of the people who were living in Russell City at the time.
Mhm.
If the statistics in the newspaper were true in terms of the ownership rates.
And have you explored any means by which you can get to the other 60%?
So that has been primarily through the media search. In terms, you know, obviously they're not going to be found on the deeds, and I haven't really figured out a way to find out anything related to people who weren't owning in the deeds records. But in the media search, what we've been doing.
Yeah, before you go to the I don't want to go to the media search right now. So you haven't checked birth and records.
I have not checked birth and records. No.
You haven't checked marriages.
No.
You haven't checked high schools.
No.
So I think those are all ways, particularly Hayward High School. I know there was someone else that mentioned that their parents, like my parents, were married in Russell City. And so by checking those marriage records, you could actually not only see who was married there, but you can also find the addresses that they lived at on the wedding certificates, because I have a copy of my parents. So that should be, I think, because media records are basically secondhand, right? It's good to know, it tells nice stories, but it doesn't point out individuals. And I think that the most important thing is that we have to establish the inn. What is your size of your inn? And I don't know if you even know that, I don't know how you can say that you have 40% just based on these.
No, as I said, if the statistic amongst as I said, what I read in the newspaper and what they listed from the redevelopment company, if that's to be believed, we're only getting at 40%, because that would be what was listed on the deeds. So that, you know, I'll definitely look into the various marriage and birth certificates and whatnot and get a sense of how long that would take.
And then I can see here that you're looking at 1963 to 1967.
No, those were the, I'm sorry, those were the deeds that were returned. When I put in the redevelopment, those were the years that were returned. So I didn't limit it to those years, but those were the years that were returned.
Got it. So if I could ask, how do you all define the period of harm that you're searching for? So for example, of those 357 unique deeds, some of them may in fact be turning from one hand to another, right? And still being in Russell City. How do we know that those aren't, I mean, multiple sales within that period of time within Russell City?
So all of the agency records, the ones that I pulled, are not between individuals. So they wouldn't have been like somebody sold it to somebody else. They're all grant deeds to the redevelopment agency of the County of Alameda. So they're all the transfers from the individuals to the redevelopment agency.
So so that whole piece is missing. All you looked at is the deeds for the redevelopment agency. Because
Correct.
when most people buy homes, is you sell from one person to another.
Correct.
So you might get to a bigger number of people if you can look at sales from a person in Russell City to whoever they sold it to. I think that you're limiting your search by only looking at searching on redevelopment agency of the county of Alameda to get to your end in terms of the size of the people who are the size, a number of people who would be impacted by the harm that occurred.
Okay.
That's all I got.
Ms. Tony Nguyen.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, my question is in the beginning, I sent the deeds for my grandfather and grandmother, and I'm wondering, is there a way to narrow down what you found based on their deeds? In other words, how much property was represented on on the deed that I sent you? Is there a way to look by name to find out what they have?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you could go to the deeds office and look up the names, look up by name and like if you knew the name of the property owner or how the property or how it was listed on the deed. I think I haven't looked that way, but I'm presuming that, you know, in the same way that redevelopment agency comes back, that those names would come back.
Okay, so you're telling me that I need to go and look somewhere, or?
No, that someone could do that, but we could also, another thing that we would do is we could look at the deeds that we pulled and the deed that and see if it's the same deeds.
Okay, because you should already have a copy of what I sent when this process first started. Regina asked me to send those copies to her.
Okay.
So I'm wondering if you guys have looked at those copies to determine how much land that deed represented.
No, I haven't seen that, but I will work with Regina on getting a copy of that.
Okay, would you need to know my name now, or how would you?
Just a point of clarification and correction. Liz, I think that was provided to you very early on in a drop file because it was too large. The pictures were too large to send via email. So you have those.
All right, we will do a cross-reference check with that.
Okay, so
but is your name? I was assuming your name was Tony Nguyen.
Yeah, but the names that are on the deed is my grandmother and grandfather, Charles and Isabel Sanders. So I would like to know how much land that deed represented.
All right, well, I think that I actually may remember those names. So I will definitely look at your deed and look at what we have and let you know.
Okay, thank you so much. That's all for me.
Can I ask 2 questions?
Yes, thank you, Tony, and thank you, Michael. Next, we'll have Priscilla.
Megan Wilkinson provided us with a copy of property owners. I don't know if that's the same list that she has. And we also collected, I'm not too sure if it's just property owners that we're talking about, because I wasn't in the beginning, or it was residents that actually rented properties. Those are my 2 questions, because if it's that, I have Jenny Hall and then Sam Nava's list of residents that were there. I'm coming whole into this process, so I'm asking those questions. And if those are help, I have an Excel sheet that she could have if she wants to.
That would be great to have. Thank you.
I think I sent you a copy, Aisha. an Excel sheet.
You
But I
did,
could send
is
it,
that today?
no, a few weeks back, 2-3 weeks back. But I could resend it off.
That's okay. I will look and send.
And I could I could marry parallel the 3 groups so that you could see who is in the multiple listings, whether they're residents or actual owners of property. I'm willing to do that. Put it on an Excel sheet for you.
Okay, that sounds like it may be helpful for Liz and George, so we'll
Thank you.
we'll connect offline to connect the two of you so that if that would be helpful for
Yeah,
you, Liz.
It might not be useful, but
Yeah. At least to have something to compare it to. All right, any other questions for this particular item? No? All right,
All right.
back to you, Liz.
All right, thank you. Okay, so we've also been doing the historical media search, still in the information gathering phase of here. So we've sifted through thousands of records related to the Hayward Daily Review, Oakland Tribune, San Francisco Chronicle, and San Francisco Examiner. The Oakland Tribune and the Hayward Daily Review are by far the greatest number. And so out of those records, we've collected about 370 newspaper articles so far. We have eliminated records related to advertisements or things that just announce a community event but don't provide any information. Articles unrelated to Russell City, et cetera. So those have been the primary things that have been eliminated. And we've created PDFs and our web links to the articles as well as summaries of each article. As part of that, this is where we've also begun to create our list of additional residents. From those media files, we collected 170 different names, but we still need to cross-reference it with the deed list. So it's not clear if those are duplicates of the deed list yet or not. And then we are still finishing up on collecting the Hayward Daily Review, but we're starting to get to the end where there's 1 or 2 articles on each page as opposed to every single article being relevant. So that's probably going to finish up here in the next week or 2. Then we have also begun to collect the information from the Alameda County Board of Supervisors. During this time, the Board of Supervisors sat as the redevelopment agency. And so as part of the Board of Supervisors records, we are looking for the invoices that were paid to the title companies who acquired properties. And so this information collection has just begun. So we'll go ahead and next steps. Questions?
Michael V. Johnson.
Just real quickly, on your media search, you should also look at the Argus.
Yes, the Argus has been included. It hasn't generated a ton of records, but it's been included.
Okay.
I see Liz, I see your hand, and Marion, I see your hand, but I also see George. George, I see your hand. So I'm assuming that this is part of the presentation. So why don't you go first, and then I'll go to Marion and then Liz.
Yes, sorry, my Wi-Fi is not the best right now. So I wasn't sure exactly what's being asked. I guess Michael V. Johnson about to search, I guess, through property being exchanged. So in the years, I didn't hear. So I wasn't sure what was being asked, but to my understanding, what we're looking for is both individuals that were forced to move as a result of the redevelopment agency's efforts. So it was to look for people who lived in Russell City during a different time frame. Is that what was being asked? Because
George, I think we're having a little difficulty hearing you. So if you're able to put your question in the chat.
I did catch some of it, Aisha. And let me just kind of respond. So while there are official dates around when people left, and then there are people who actually accepted dollars from the redevelopment agency, there are also those people who moved in anticipation of having to move, that won't be recorded in any redevelopment agency. For example, when my grandparents moved to Russell City from West Oakland, and the 980 freeway was coming through, they moved to Russell City before the 980 was built, but they moved because they knew it was coming and they had to move. Had there been no 980, they wouldn't have moved to Russell City in the first place. So just looking at redevelopment agency data that says, oh, these are the ones that actually receive money, is not representative of those, it's not representative of people who made decisions to leave because they knew what was getting ready to happen. And you're not going to capture those people just by looking at those records, because they're like, hey, I'm not going to fight it. They're telling us I got to leave, so now I'm going to leave, right? They are impacted because of the decision that was made, regardless of if there's any records to that effect from the redevelopment agency. So it's like there should be a window that says, and if you go back, and I'm sure there's, when you go back and look at your media records, what you will see is there were repeated efforts by the people in Russell City going back as far as the early 50s, where they were actually trying to stay there. They were actually trying to make Russell City a real city. And they got repeatedly rebuffed by the city of Hayward and by Alameda County. And so if you look at it from that point of where you can declaratively see where it is the intent of the residents of Russell City to stay in Russell City, and they make collective efforts to stay, it should be from that period of time that you start kind of get a sense of what your in is, not just at the tail end of what the data shows from the redevelopment agency. That's what I'm getting at.
George, does that help answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I hope you can hear me.
Maybe if you want to try turning your camera off,
okay.
It might give you a little bit better reception.
Yeah, so that makes a lot of sense. I think then for us, I think the next step would be for the committee to decide, what years you would want us to begin that search residency. Were you able to hear me now?
Yes, we're starting to hear you. We're starting to hear you better.
I agree, George. And I think that the media records will point us to that date, or to the date where you begin to see a lot of activity. I can't speak for the rest of the group, but I've done a lot of media research as well. And there are a clear period of time where you can actively and aggressively see the residents of Russell City trying to stay in Russell City and going to the city and having their own committees actively going to the city. There was a proposal that was made that was rejected by the Mount Eden community, which was right next door. And there are specific dates associated with that. So honing in on when you can see real activity around Russell City residents making clear to the community that they wanted to stay should be where the beginning of that harm and who was harmed begins.
Thank you, Michael. So George just placed in the chat, just so it's read into the record. Sorry about the connection issues, everyone. Thanks for the clarification. I think the next step would be for the committee to decide what year we should expand the search to. Okay. Thank you, George. I'm gonna come back to that item momentarily. We have two. There was Liz that has her hand raised. Marion had her hand raised earlier, and then Deborah, I'll go back to you. So I'm not sure if Marion's question was answered. I'm gonna
The question was answered. Thank you. Pass on, Marion.
okay, all right. Thank you, Marion. Liz.
I'm just circling back to the amount of churches. I think we asked this the other day, and in your slide only showed, was it only 2 that you had shown us today?
I think my slide said 6.
Oh.
Yeah, it was 2 businesses, 6
Oh,
churches.
2 businesses. I'm sorry, my bad.
No worries.
Okay, thank you. And I hear there was 7, so I'm not sure where what the 7th one would be.
Yeah, it could be, that's what I'm thinking with some of the businesses that it's individuals that own the property. So individuals are listed on the deeds. I only identified 6 that were clearly churches or organizations to me, but if somebody else, like one of you all, were to look at the list, you might identify something else that I've missed, obviously.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Deborah Harris?
Yes, I am so sorry. My computer was frozen, and so I had to go to my phone, then I came back. I don't know what's going on. But anyway, as far as the deeds are concerned, the meetings took place, I think, probably in the 50s. I'm not exactly sure of the date, where they signed petitions and stuff to try to get the facilities put out there. And so I think we need to go back, not just with the redevelopment. That was the end of the whole situation, but I think we need to go back. As Michael had said, I was listening to him, and that's exactly what should be done. So that's where I am with the deeds. And the school records, people should have they should probably have their own school records. I'm not sure. They had records at Russell School, and they had records at Hayward High and Mount Eaton or wherever. So I don't know, but yeah, we need to get all that stuff. I'm sorry. I'm done.
Okay, no apology needed. Liz, did that help provide some additional context as to school records being referenced as well? And the districts, or at least there were high school districts and elementary districts at the time. I can look at some of the historical info I have for the Eden area and see what districts there were and send it to you. Was there someone else's hand? I just wanted to check with Ms. Gloria Moore, just to make sure. Do you have any questions, Gloria? I know that you were in the car earlier, but just to ensure that, especially for those who are former residents, that your questions have been answered.
I don't have any questions. Thanks.
Okay, all right. And Marion, do you have any questions that?
No, my questions were answered.
Okay,
Yeah,
just
thank
wanted
you.
to double check. And we have our
Thank you so much.
new committee members, Francesca and Priscilla. Priscilla, you asked a question earlier, so I'm going to go to Francesca. Francesca, do you have Any questions that you'd like to just ask as part of this update from the researchers?
No, I don't have any questions.
Okay, thank you. Michael D. Johnson, I see that you just, I'm sure you did not, just want to check in with you. Do you have a question? Could you just turn your camera on?
Yeah, I just turned my camera. I've been here the whole time, but one of the
I'm
questions.
not saying that you haven't been here the whole time. I just thought you, listen, I'm not Zoom judging right now.
Right.
I just want to make sure that you know I saw you.
One of the questions I was thinking about was when you're talking about the deeds and things, right? I do have a printout of a couple of the properties that my grandmother owned, right? And so I wanted to be able to circle back with them about that if that's possible. Because I can email it to them or whatever, the copy of what I have, and it shows their name, my grandfather, my grandmother's name on this type. I guess it's a deed, a lot. It tells you who owns the lots. You know, I got it at the Hayward library last year or something.
Oh, yeah, it'd be great to see those. I put mine and George's emails in the chat. If you could send those over to us.
Oh yeah, I see it, Liz. I see it. Thank you.
Perfect. All right. Any additional questions for Liz and George? Last call for questions. And so Liz, your question for us, you would like some insight on on direction. So George asked a question about committee to decide what year we should the search should be expanded to.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the media, we definitely cover all of that. So what might make more sense is to think about, us writing up what we found in the media search, which we talked about at the steering committee meeting, and then revisiting this conversation.
Sorry, I'm looking for some acknowledgement from somebody on this. Does that sound good? Michael V. Johnson, Liz, Deborah Harris.
Yeah,
Marion. Oh, sorry. I'm going to go with the hands first. I see you, Marion.
I think we should revisit.
Sorry. It sounds good that we should give some additional direction to expand the search to include more years and to move backwards so we can really start seeing exactly when everything started moving in terms of, I think they tried to incorporate or something like that, the city, Russell City, they tried to do an incorporation or something. Just go back and just capture as much stuff as you can.
Is it this one or this one? I think it's.
Pardon me?
Go ahead, Mary.
Okay. And then I had a question as it relates, and this is maybe outside of what we're talking about, but in terms of the information that they've accumulated so far, I think Liz said that she had delivered some information already to the city of Hayward. I'm wondering, has that information and those details and documents been delivered to the committee? And if it hasn't, when will it be delivered to the committee? Thank you.
Thank you, Marion. Liz or George, would you like to?
I'm not sure when it will be delivered from the city of Hayward to the committee. We had talked about setting up a OneDrive and getting access, and I'm not sure where Brianne was at on that.
She told me it would take her a couple of weeks to clean up all the files so that they are in, good searchable order, not necessarily searchable as they'll be able to be searched when they are put on the website. That's going to take considerably more time, but I asked her to kind of create the OneDrive in a way that the committee could have as soon as access. So given her workload and other projects, she said a couple of weeks. So we're looking at a couple of weeks, but that was last week, so maybe just 1 week. I can follow up with her today to see how far along she is, but everything that the researchers have turned over to us, we will make available to you electronically.
Marion, I see your hand. I'm going to go back to you to see if this is a follow-up question based on Ms. Youngblood's answer.
Thank you. So my question then becomes, I know that Ms. Youngblood stated that there's a staff member that is going through all of the information that has been delivered to the city. And I don't want to seem sarcastic or, but I'm a little concerned that someone from the committee is not also pairing up with them to make sure that when they're, filtering, that nothing gets placed outside of us being able to see everything that was delivered. So my question is there someone from our committee that is actually paired up with the staff of Hayward to just make sure nothing gets dropped or misplaced or whatever?
There is not yet anyone paired with the city representative, at least from the chair, vice chair, parliamentarian, or the treasurer. This is the first that we are hearing about the city, I think, webmaster or web specialist going through the information. And so I think that is a good suggestion for us to connect about before moving forward with anything else. Ms. Youngblood?
Yeah, and I just want to make sure that it's clear. She's not reading through anything because she doesn't have that kind of time or capacity. It's just about putting it in various folders based on the categories that she has discussed with the researchers. Is this media file? Is this a deed? Is this some other kind of file? So just putting it in those buckets. We are turning over to the committee every single document that the researchers are putting in the drop file for you to review. We are not taking any documents away or in any way doctoring the documents that are being provided to us. It's just placing them in buckets as has been outlined between the conversations between the researchers and the city of how to categorize the information for your review.
Okay, thank you. There are additional hands that are up. We'll go to Liz Sanchez first, and then Michael V. Johnson.
I just had a thought. What about Regina, if we could get the data, raw data, just so we can have it, and then just so that we have the original copy, and then it could still be sorted for the whole to be put on the web.
You can have it any kind of way you want it. So if you don't mind it not necessarily being in categories, I'll just tell Brianne quickly, set it up so that you can have access to whatever is there for your own review.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Michael V. Johnson.
So we were talking about what the period of time should be. And a lot of the research has been based on this redevelopment agency. So if we think about it from that perspective, then if we go back and think about when the redevelopment agencies were established with federal legislation, that year is 1948. And so from the time that federal legislation has been created until which time the agency has actually been established at Alameda County may be a way to whittle off some of that period of time that we would have to look at. So if it's 1948 that federal legislation was created to create these redevelopment agencies, and then the redevelopment agencies say didn't start until 1955, then maybe we can whittle off that back end and say, oh, maybe we should just be looking at from 1955. So that'd probably be a great way to say, here's where the harm began, because as we look at the media research that we have, what the Alameda County and what the city of Hayward did, just based on what I've seen in the media, was very calculated, all the way down to the selection of the company that bought the land, Cabot, and Forbes. So I would say, let's start with, when was the Alameda County Redevelopment Agency actually established? Because that would be the first place that we can consider or assume that we have some documentation about where the collusion began between this Alameda County and the city of Hayward. It couldn't have started before that because it wouldn't have existed before that. Does that make sense?
I mean, the city and the county were working before the redevelopment agency was established. Just.
Right, but plans for Russell City didn't occur before 1948, I don't believe.
Yeah, the redevelopment agency was started much later than 1948, so.
Right. Okay, so that, I mean, you were asking for suggestions as to what the window should be, so that's just one suggestion.
Thank you, Michael. Are there additional questions or comments? Tony, I think was your hand raised? No? All right.
I have a question.
Okay, go for it, Priscilla.
Okay, Alameda County owned the property prior to City of Hayward. And people were damaged with the conditions that they lived in, without sewers, without water, running water. And I'm just wondering if that is part of this process as well, you know? So that is a question that I have, because a lot of people lived under those conditions, and other parts of the county were taken care of, but not Russell City.
You know, that's very, very true. And that's part of the story that we hope to tell through our media search, in the context that the city of Hayward contracted us to do, is to really so that, you know, that whole story will come out when we present on kind of the findings from our the story that many of you already know, but, you know, putting it in to a report form.
All right. Priscilla, did that help answer your question, or do you have additional questions?
Well, no, just to acknowledge the fact that that was damage to the people that lived at that time, you know, in the 40s. I know my husband was born there, and they live under those conditions, you know, his grandparents as well.
Thank you. Ms. Deborah?
I think we should go back to the 40s, maybe, to see what we can find for ownership. I think that would be a good starting point. You know, if we can't find a whole bunch by the 50s, but, you know, go back to that year, that time. I'm just thinking out loud, but that's what I'm thinking. Because they had already forced people to live there because they couldn't live anywhere else. They couldn't buy, they couldn't even, you know, all the media and stuff that they had out was saying, you know, you can get a place to live in Russell City. So, Yeah, start there.
I think Russell City was red line, and that's why the only place that people could get property, Latinos and Blacks.
Liz and George, would you like to respond to those comments? Or
I mean, I would
requests?
just be in total agreement that that is exactly what was happening with the area. And, you know, the stories that you all are relaying are, you know, I think you're exactly right that the harm of Russell City was going on for a long time before the redevelopment agency.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. We are a little bit past time, but I just want to make sure if there are any additional comments or questions that any of the steering committee members have to provide direction to the researchers, that you please share it now. So the next update we'll receive from the researchers, they'll be joining us again on the 29th to share an update during our next meeting that will be open to the public, rather than the public hearing this information on a tape delay, if you will, via YouTube weeks after after the meeting has already taken place. So Liz and George, during that meeting, you'll provide a summary of the most up-to-date information that you have, correct?
Correct, with the caveat that we won't present anything to the public that we don't present to the steering committee first.
Thank you for clarifying that. I do want to circle back because I know that there will be questions about the renters and any information that's obtained about property or any sort of property transaction or payment for property related to anyone who didn't own their property. And so what steps will you take between now and next month that help us gather additional information about renters?
I'm not sure what next steps we'll be able to take between now and next month. I'll definitely consult what it would look like to consult the birth and death records. So I'll go and check that out. But, you know, to be perfectly honest with you all, like I got to also collect the Board of Supervisors records. And George and I are doing a bunch of different buckets right now, and we also have our own full-time job. So
Sure.
yeah, so I definitely, will continue, and I'll be able to, tell you what's going on with the birth, death, and marriage records. But I can't commit at this point to having done a comprehensive search of those records by the next meeting.
Okay. Appreciate the honesty, and would ask that when you present to the larger group next week that you're prepared to address I think the depth of the research that's been done thus far, and specifically acknowledge the work that you believe, or the length of time that you believe you will need to search for the birth, death, and marriage records, as well as any other information related to those additional folks from Russell City who may have been renters and were harmed by this process.
What I'd like to update you on is the possibility of the birth, marriage, and death records, and what information I would need to be able to search those. I don't know if I'm going to be able to just put in Russell City and find the records. And if I can't do that, that then becomes a barrier to finding the information without names.
Sure.
But I will update you on the records.
Okay, thank you. Marion, I see your hand.
Yes, thank you. Speaking to the birth, marriage records, and potentially high school and school records, because what you've accumulated, what I think at this time is the deeds, which list the owners of the property. In the case of my family, my grandparents owned the property, but they had children. and their children would have been in high school. Their children would have gotten married like my parents. So that's where you're going to pull in, you know, additional residents' names, because most of the people here were children of homeowners, but they were also residents as well. So that will pull in, you know, a number of individuals for the report. That's just my thought.
Thank you, Marion. All right, we're going to close out this item because we are on the way to 8 p.m. and I'm mindful of time, and we have just one more large thing to talk about. George and Liz, do you have any last words for us or things that you'd like us to think about before this next meeting?
No, I think we'll just continue on with the research that we're doing and find out that information for you all and report back.
Okay, thank you very much for your time. And we wish you well as you continue to gather information.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that ends item number 5. Brings us to item number 6, agenda planning for the public meeting on the 29th. So in our earlier meeting, we adopted a 2-meeting schedule. The first meeting of every month being the meeting that we hold as a steering committee. The second meeting being an update that we invite the public to and community to. So we want to talk a little bit about what the format of that meeting will be. So the very first meeting, we in a previous meeting talked about inviting the mayor and a few other folks to serve on to provide short updates about what they are doing. But 2 of those guests would be the mayor of Hayward, Mark Salinas, the chair of the Community Service Commission, Artavia Berry. Artavia Berry is the chair of the Community Service Commission and played an instrumental role in writing the apology that was proposed by the Community Services Commission and then adopted by the Hayward City Council. And our committee is a byproduct of the recommendations that were adopted unanimously by the Hayward City Council. So the apology that was issued and adopted by the Hayward City Council, one of the things that we thought would be helpful for Mayor Salinas to discuss is what the apology meant, because we have not yet heard from any member of the council or the mayor recently about what the apology meant, what it means now, and the direction that they are providing to staff as far as engaging in this process with us as a steering committee. We wanted to hear the perspective from both Ms. Berry and Mayor Salinas. In addition to that, Kelly McAdoo, the city manager, Ms. McAdoo will also be joining us for the meeting, or has stated that she is available to attend the meeting as well. And I'm forgetting someone. Committee members, help me. Chris from Michael V. Johnson, or
Chris Logson from CJEC.
It's from CJEC, thank you. And CJEC stands for, hold on a minute. CJEC is the acronym for the Coalition for a Just and Equitable California. So the work that we are doing related to Russell City, Chris has been invited to join us to talk about the work happening at a state level with regards to reparations and reparative practices and discussions and things that will be helpful for us to know. And Deborah or Liz or Michael V. Johnson, am I forgetting something? So we just wanted to talk a little bit about how the meeting would be structured. So we have those invited guests. This will be the first time that this forum will be public in quite some time, in quite some time, since the first meetings were held inviting folks to participate in the process. So we just wanted to check in to make sure that any input that you have about the format of the meeting can be shared and discussed now. Michael V. Johnson.
Yes, since this is the first public meeting since the committee formed, one of our thoughts was that introducing the steering committee members to the community would be a part of that, the flow of the meeting. Introduction of those speakers that Aisha just referred to. Given that we've got about 2 hours, if you would, then 15 to 20 minutes probably for each of those speakers to kind of speak their piece, as long as we had somewhere in the neighborhood of about, what, a half an hour for primarily the public who's attending the meeting to ask questions of those invited guests, not necessarily for the steering committee to hog the questioning, if you will, of those invited guests. That it would be one way that we could also do it is to have, as the speakers are speaking, to have the guests to put their questions into the chat. That would be a very good way to manage the questions that are being presented versus having people interrupt them during each of their speaking, the time that they're speaking. That was just a thought that I had. As long as we have enough time for the community who's participating to be able to ask questions directly to those who are presenting.
Thank you, Michael. I think that's a great suggestion. And in addition to those speakers, we'd also have the researchers return and provide an update. So we're anticipating that there will be questions, as we always have questions. And so we want to just ensure that the time is effectively used and people can can share their questions with us and have their voices heard. So does that sound like a good plan for the next meeting, or would you like to play it by ear and then we can make some adjustments for the future meeting, as this is the first meeting we will be convening since the steering committee has been formed? I see some heads nodding, so looks like everybody's okay with it. All right. And I see some thumbs up. Okay. Well, unless there are any other comments or questions about the next meeting, we're going to move to any agenda items for a future meeting. I did hear some feedback about budget information, a budget update for the next month's meeting. So during the meeting on the 29th, we're not necessarily introducing new topics. It's a summary or an overview or collection of the topics that we have been discussing this month, so that everyone hears them in live time. And then next month, for the first meeting of the month, one of the the suggestions for an agenda topic for next month has been a budget update. Are there any other suggestions?
So I think this be a good way to do this is, I know that we have on the last Friday of each month, a meeting with Regina and with Jenny to do some agenda planning. So if any of the steering committee members had specific agenda items that you want us to bring to that meeting, that would be a good way for us to bring fully to the table everything that may be useful or might be interested in discussing in the month of April.
Yes, thank you for that. So if you have any ideas, feel free to send them our way. So we have them in preparation for that meeting. Any items for the good of the order? Item number 8 on the agenda. No pressure, but this is always an open forum. I know that we have some, if there's anything that especially some of our former residents would like to share about what they've heard today, any thoughts, any good news? Liz, I see your hand.
Thank you. This is a question for Regina. When will the media be posted to notify of this public meeting? And or can we have something so I can also place on my Facebook to family members that may not live in Hayward? So we can have some type of flyer or something that we can post and share to our network.
So that's a great question. I wasn't aware that that's something that you wanted. Certainly we can work with our team to put something together. We also have various individuals, over 100 that have signed up through the project site for input and information. We can send out a communication to all of those individuals that have signed up about this upcoming meeting, if that is your desire. I think what would be helpful for us is if we had the link to share, right? So as soon as that's available, we can put something together for you to share on your networks and also for us to share on the project site. And also to send that same communication out to everybody that signed up for information.
Thank you.
Sure, thank you. So we'll work on just connecting with you offline to look at a general announcement and what that information would look like. That includes the link and the agenda, so it can be shared with folks. So if they have questions and are not able to come, there's somewhere where they can send the questions to help guide the process as well, because we know people may have conflicts. So we want to ensure that there's a way for them to submit their comments or questions if they're not able to log on virtually. All right, thank you for that, Ms. Youngblood. Any other items for the good of the order? All right, if you think of something, feel free to send it in. If not, our next meeting will be on Wednesday, March 29th. It's 7:52, is it 7:52 p.m. You get 8 minutes back. Thank you.
That's a record, folks. That's a record.
Thank you for being here this evening and sharing this space. I'm going to call it a meeting and wish you all well. Have a good night, and we'll see you next time.
Night.
Good night.
Good